microphone. Action. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining in. And I have a very special opportunity today. I actually get to interview the man, the myth, the legend, as it were, Greg.
Wow.
My dad, actually, nonetheless. Mr. Greg, I'm glad you're here with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. Thank you very much for having me.
It is an important part of what we do, is to get stories out and backgrounds and let people know what the industry has done. Let the people know what the industry has done for people within the industry and stuff. So we'll go over a few things, intro about yourself, your background, history, changes that you've seen over time to the plumbing industry. And then we got a special right at the end, something special just for everybody.
A little surprise.
If you don't mind, let's start with an intro.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Greg. I started plumbing back in the middle 70s, and I really haven't done a whole lot since. We'll get into the history of it and the day-to-day things, but I got involved in residential stuff and then changed into some pretty heavy commercial applications and industrial things, hospitals and things like that, and just pretty much stayed with plumbing all along. Never really changed, never really wanted to change. It's been a good trade, and we like to try to draw as many kids as we can into it, and that's what we're here to do, is try to entice a couple people into the trade.
I think letting everybody know that it's not what everybody thinks it is. There's a lot of other opportunities within the trade. Not every plumber is a service plumber.
Right.
And I think that's a common misconception amongst the general population, is that everybody's a service plumber.
Absolutely. And then even deeper than that, there's probably, I don't even know, there could be 25, 30 different trades within the trade. Some even in the commercial side, there's new construction, commercial or add-ons or undergrounds. Everybody has their niche, and it's surprising how different they are and how much knowledge it takes for each one of those categories.
It's funny you say niche, because we talk about that a lot in class, is that it's very niche.
Yeah.
Like you very seldom see plumbing shops that are do-all, one-stop plumbing.
That's right. And certainly not plumbers.
Right. Certainly not plumbers. Yeah. You usually find something that you either like or are very good at in the beginning, and then kind of hit it and run from there.
Yep.
So I think that covered background.
Pretty much.
Also, like you said, a lot of commercial down in Florida.
Yeah, mainly commercial in Florida. A lot of high rises, some factories. We did a factory that did nothing but hubcaps for General Motors. That was kind of cool. It was Florida Production Engineering. That was kind of neat. And just all kinds. We did a lot of work at the Speedway, and it just all kinds of different applications, but mainly commercial, heavy commercial.
So then I want to go back. I'm writing this down. I want to go back and talk about some stuff with the Speedway and some stories. But I think we can't start in the middle. Right. So I think we should go all the way back. So how did you get involved in plumbing? I know this story. I've heard this story before, but they haven't.
Sure.
So
I understand. Yeah.
What got you involved in it and kind of start to finish?
Sure. Well, excuse me. It's kind of interesting that a lot of people get into something and they either don't remember it or they do it on purpose, one of those kind of things. And my introduction into plumbing was about as opposite an introduction into a trade as you could get. My parents had somehow ended up in Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma.
OU, baby.
The OU, yeah, Boomer Sooner. And I was 14 or so, 15, 14. And we lived in a little subdivision, a little blonde girl walking down the sidewalk, pretty cute little gal. And so I went out and talked to her and hung around with her for a few days. And her dad was a plumber. So it didn't take me long to figure out that if I hung around with him and helped him with plumbing, I got to hang around with her. And she was a good bit of fun to hang around with when I was 14, 15 years old. So that was actually how I get into plumbing, is just kind of natural. I figured, well, if I go to work with him, then I can hang around her.
What year are we talking about?
Must have been 1976, early 76, maybe late 75, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was his name?
His name was Paul Workman. He was a licensed plumber. He'd been plumbing since, I don't know, he was born in 1933. So he'd been doing plumbing work since the 50s, I guess. He was in the Korean War. So he was an okay plumber. He was a service plumber, did all kinds of different things. And I enjoyed hanging around him. He had power tools, and he let me drive the truck before we were too young to drive the truck, kind of thing. And I enjoyed that as much as I did anything else. So it got me on the right foot, got me interested in showing up every day, because it was always different. We did a lot of remodels and service pieces, but very few new construction projects. We did a U-Haul in Oklahoma City, big building, and a couple other small things, but not very much like that.
So mid-70s.
Yeah.
Started doing plumbing work with Paul. Learn a bunch of stuff. Stay with it for a couple of years, kind of off and on.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happens after that?
Well, apparently the relationship didn't last quite as long as we thought it was going to. And so it was never really, it was just a couple kids anyway. But I ended up traveling roundaboutly. And I ended up in New England and then New Hampshire with my wife now. That was 1980. And I went to work for a company up there, and they did nothing but McDonald's restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a little bit of background. I didn't have much experience with that cold, though.
That's a different environment.
That cold was a bit of an eye opener, you know. But and back then it was all lead and oakum. It was all hard work. It was all copper. It was thread and 4-inch, 3-inch galvanized pipe and black iron pipe for gas work. It was really something. So, but that's all they did. And I was up there for over a year. And they even had the ditches for McDonald's restaurant dug behind the shop. Matter of fact, you were there.
Yeah, I've been up there. It was the name, sorry, escapes me.
It's Apollo Plumbing.
Apollo Plumbing. Yeah. Same building.
Yeah.
After
same
4
guy.
years, same guy.
Yeah.
Walk in and he's like, "Yeah, I remember you, Greg." Like
that's right.
Yeah,
right
up on it. Yeah. It was a neat experience for me, to go to a place where you had history and where it was plumbing specific history.
Absolutely.
It was really neat.
Yeah. And it'd been way over 40 years since I saw that person, Bobby Demures. And I walked in door and said something. He was on it immediately. There was no hesitation in his voice whatsoever. He knew exactly what it was, and we talked about it. It's funny that I can imagine all the people he's known, and certainly all the people that I've known in that length of time. So it was great having that vindication and having my son there. It was really cool. And the shop, the paint was a little worn out.
It might have been original paint.
It probably was, yeah. But it was horrible. The shop was okay, but the work was hard. It was, you could see tools in the back of the truck, but they were frozen, and it was horrible work. So somewhere along must have been what would be the fall of 80, 81, something like that, I guess. My wife and I were at a laundromat. We're just barely teenagers. I think we were 19 or 20. And there was a magazine on the table, and it had a list of the worst cities in the United States, and where we were living was on that list. And I thought, man, I don't know. My parents bought and sold real estate quite a bit when we were kids, so we moved a lot. So I didn't really have a home base, and didn't really matter to me where I lived, except I knew that I didn't want to live there.
Don't want to be that cold.
Yeah. So my wife was busy doing the laundry, and I'm looking at the magazine. It said list of the top 10 best cities on the next page, and I told my wife, I'm gonna turn this page, and I'm gonna see what the best city is, and we're gonna go there. She's like, okay. So we flipped the page, and it was Orlando. And so
slightly different.
So yeah, a little different, a little flat. No freezing, no freezing, or once a year maybe. So we did. We're like the Beverly Hillbillies, man. We loaded up that truck and piled the stuff, and a newborn daughter in the floorboard, and we coasted across the state line of Florida with about $300 and an old beat up van, and it was definitely one of the best things we had ever done, is get out of that weather and go down to Florida for sure.
Especially then.
Yes.
Right. Orlando's going through a giant construction boom
crazy
at the time.
Yeah. Crazy.
Some apartment complexes. You'll get in that here in just a second.
Oh yeah.
So you start in Oklahoma, start learning a trade. You go to New England, have no problem at all finding a job.
No, never.
Instantly.
Right.
Decide to leave because it's just not your flavor of space.
Horrible.
Yeah. Go to Orlando now, right? 3 different regions completely. No difficulty finding a job, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I believe I got a job the same day we got to Orlando, actually. It's actually more than one, but I didn't know. I had never done track housing before, and Florida was full of multifamily and track housing, large, huge subdivisions, So I just hit the ground running. That's what I did for a couple of years. All I did was undergrounds. Every day, went to work, got in the truck with a helper, and went and put an underground in for a house. Every single day, just whittled it. So at the end of the first year, we didn't even need a tape measure to measure the pieces. We knew how long the pipe was supposed to be, each piece, and that piece is 35 inches. It was like a puzzle at that point. We just did them so many times. So that's where I kind of cut my teeth on repetition and code and working.
Production, a little like understanding how to produce.
Get it done. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're into the mid 80s.
So and actually while I was at that company, a company still exists, it's still open. It's called Belzer Plumbing in Winter, Springs, Florida, Altamont Springs. And there was a guy that would show up about 10 o'clock every morning at the job site, no matter who we were working with or where we were. And he had on a nice little shirt, and he'd get out of his new truck and walk over, and he would point to the guys and talk a little bit to everybody. And I'd spend about 30 minutes or so, and then he would.
Meanwhile, you're hanging out in a ditch.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm on the end of a shovel.
Yeah.
And he would leave. And I remember pretty early on thinking, I'm really not sure, but I think I'd rather do his job than this job.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking, how did he get that job? And again, now I've got a baby now. She's 2 years old or so, and we always made decent money, but I know I'm not going to hang out on this long tool for the rest of my life. So it got me thinking, gee, I think I'd rather be in charge than I would do this. So you changed around back then. You changed around for money. There were so many jobs available, and it was so easy. It was all pretty fairly easy work.
Well, we talk about that with, like, back then you could just put an ad in the paper, saying, "Hey, we need a plumber," and then 25 plumbers would show up.
Yeah, if you did that back in any time in the 80s, I guess, if you put an ad in the paper for a plumber, there'd be 25, 30 guys show up.
Right.
And they were good plumbers. There were a lot of them around because of the trade schools in the 70s. That they were plentiful. Mm-hmm. So I went to work for a guy named Benny Tillman. Excuse me. And he was doing multifamily, some of the biggest work in the country, actually. Mm-hmm. And so this particular time we were on a project. There were 50 other plumbers, and it was just a giant thing. And I was just one of the guys. I was on the trim crew now, so I had made it out of the ditch, and I was just setting fixtures. And I was watching this particular apartment building. It was about 3 stories tall. And the guys would get in their trucks, and they would take it, and they would drive up to the job trailer, which wasn't a semi-trailer. It was a large construction trailer. And then they would pick up a couple of fittings and drive all the way back down in. And a few minutes later, a different guy. So I saw that, and I had a company truck. All plumbers back then had company truck. So I took that company truck, and I went up to the job trailer, and I tied onto it, and I actually dragged it down to the building. And I wasn't in charge of anything. There was a guy in charge of the complex, a plumber. But anyway, so
which if anybody ever watching this has hung out with you for more than about 4 seconds, that is like the most Greg thing ever, right? Like nobody is surprised by that. It's like, yeah, of course, Greg.
Yeah, let's quit wasting time with this deal. So I did that, and about 30, 45 minutes later, the owner of the company, which he didn't make an appearance very often, he wanted to know who moved the job trailer. He came down, he was huffing. He had a real high voice. Greg. He was something else. And he became a Winter Park, Florida inspector for like 25 years.
Really? After
that. Yeah, he was a plumber. He took his plumbing test 11 times.
Oh, God.
And he never passed it. He just threatened to sue the state because he took it 11 times. And they finally said, okay, fine.
Fine.
And they just gave it to him.
And then he went to be the inspector.
Yeah, and then he really wasn't good at it, so he just was an inspector because he did that. But anyway, he wanted to know who moved that job trailer. And I told him I did, and he put me in charge of this apartment complex. So there's 50 plumbers, and it was one of the largest apartment complexes in the United States. And somehow here I was at 24, maybe 25. Well, it was when you were born.
So 85.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I'm in charge. And I thought, well, I made it to where Roland was back in the day, And then I started realizing that there was a great deal of knowledge to be gained from what I was doing, because I got to experience what each person did on that job every day, because the problems came to the person in charge. And I'm going to splinter off for just a second. We had a guy working for us. His name was Mr. Ellis, and he was in charge of installing tubs. That's all he did. They were steel tubs. And we had a crew that did nothing but drill holes, and a crew that did nothing but copper. And so it was very...
Once again, specialized.
Yeah.
So all plumbers, but specialized.
Yep. Well, you figure on a big job like that, if you had 50 buildings and you had all these plumbers and you put them all doing everything, it would be chaotic.
It's too much.
Yeah. So one crew would go through and drill all the holes. You put one of the best plumbers on that crew with some kids with Timberwolf drills. So when the guys went in to run the copper and run in the plastic, all the holes were already there.
Right.
Now, it sounds like a lot to somebody who's new in plumbing, but if you've been doing this for 10 or 15 years, you know where the holes are going to go. So he would go in, this guy would go in and drill all the holes. So Mr. Ellis's portion of this job was to set the tubs. And so he would set, I don't know how many, 1,500, it was 1,500 or 1,800 tubs on this job. And I saw him one day working on the back of his truck, and he had a stack of 2x4s. He probably had 15 2x4s stacked up, and he was putting them all in a line. And I was curious, and what he did is he marked the first one at 5 feet, whatever the measurement was. And when he cut the first one with the circular saw, it made a mark on the second one, so he didn't have to measure the second one. Well, then he took the second one off, and there was a mark on the third one. I hope everybody's following me here. He marked one.
He flushed up all the ends.
And
then used the tip of the blade to mark the next one.
Yeah, so when he took it off,
marked
and he did it. So he would mark one and cut 25 2x4s and go install them with one pencil mark. And I got to thinking, wow, there might be a little bit more to this, because I would just take out a tape measure and measure one and cut it and measure the other one. So from then on, from that day, from 1985, I've taught hundreds of people, hey man, put the tape measure down and just measure the first one, and the rest of them you can cut. And they're all just so amazed. It's like putting the soap in the car wash bucket before you put the water in.
Yeah, that was a life hack that I didn't learn until much later in life.
Folks, put the water in a bucket, then the soap.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just getting to the point of that. These old guys have knowledge and they have things to teach, and they don't even know they're teaching it, because they don't realize they have to teach that. It just is what it is.
Right. I always say wisdom is the culmination of knowledge and experience.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really a thing. It really makes a big difference in anything, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and then to continue. So, I did that for a really long time. I worked with that guy for years and years, probably till like 1987 or so. And then I moved again. We moved over closer to the beach, New Smyrna Beach, Daytona Beach area.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work for a guy for a short time. Ron Troutman was his name. About a year. He was a super nice guy. He was older, and it wasn't a money job. So one of the larger companies in Daytona had an ad, and I had called, and it was 19 miles away from where I lived. And they called and said they'd be interested in talking to me. And I told them, I said, well, you know what? If there's not a job, I really don't want to drive 19 miles up there and back. If this is a job, it's fine. So, but anyway, so make a long story short, I got the job.
Once again, a little bit of
yeah.
Anybody that's hung out with Greg would know. Yeah.
There's no reason to be any other way. If you have the trade and you own it, then just own it.
Yes. You're looking for what I have.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be that way. If you're looking for what I have.
Yeah.
So I went to work for them, and I worked for them for quite some time, and we did a lot of work at the Speedway, and we did a lot of high rises. Actually, I was still in the field at this point. Great job. It was really cool. It was really neat, the things we got to do, especially working on the beach. I used to complain there was too much sunlight on the beach. And then I bought a vise for my truck,
mm-hmm.
and I had a new truck, and I just loved being a plumber. I had all the cool toolboxes and all the things, and but we couldn't cut all thread very well without a vise for my truck.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a 2-week vacation, which was probably one of the first ones I ever took. This is 1988, I think. I'm hoping I'm right with the dates. I think 88, 89. And when I came back from the vacation after 2 weeks, about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, I was at the shop, and my vise had come in, and I was on the back of my truck, and I was excited about installing my vise on my truck. And the PA went off, and it said, Greg, please come to the office. Greg, come to the office. And I'm like, man, I really don't want to. I don't want to do that. I want to finish.
I don't know what all this is about, but
yeah, I was a 160-pound long-haired kid who just did plumbing work. Man, I just wanted to work. I was pretty good at it. So the owner went in, and the owner was in the office early, which is unusual. And he had my check in his hand. He had it in a little envelope, and he's tapping it on his desk. And I'm following it, and I'm still in my mid-20s at this time. And it had my name on it. I could tell it was my check, and he asked me to shut the door. And he said, hey, we've been thinking quite a bit. And since you've been gone, and what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to come in the office and help us with the crews. And we had 6 or 7 trucks. And
was this idea sparked from anything in particular?
Yeah, I used to go in the office and show my rear end all the time, because I'd be out working in the field, and the estimators that were in the sales guys, it was quiet where they were, and it was still, and there was no wind, and they could do math a lot easier than I could out in the wind. And I used to tell them that, listen, when you guys order materials and do these dimensions, do it in here. And I used to tell them loudly enough, I guess, that I can come in here and do your job, but you can't get up off your chair and do mine.
Right.
So help me do mine from in here. It just makes everything easier. Well, apparently the owner had heard me say that, and over time, he took it to heart, apparently. So
I think as Jimmy Buffett said, young and aggressive.
yes,
Yep.
yeah. But it was the way it was. Aggression wasn't something that somebody had. Some people, most people, it was like a prison yard back then.
A little bit different.
It was a lot
Yeah,
different.
culturally,
Yeah.
the people were
Yeah.
it was very different. Yeah.
There was no insulting anybody back then. You were just hoping that you didn't get hit in the head.
Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it was no joke. I've seen fights. It was different. So anyway, so this guy's holding my check and he said, we'd like you to come in the office and run the cruise. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. And I reached over and I grabbed my check and I folded it and I put it in my pocket. And I said, that's really not something I'm interested in, but I appreciate it. That's really cool. He said, okay. He said, we thought you'd say that. And if you think that way, then that's your last check.
Ouch.
Mm.
You got kids at home, right?
I
You
got
got
kids home. Yeah.
I'm, what, 4 or 5 myself?
Man, good job. Like $10 an hour. It was a good job. And a company truck. And I liked it. And I thought, damn,
New Vice.
yeah. I never did get to use my new Vice, but I had
Son
it.
of
So I said, well, if you want to do something like that, when do you want to start it? He said, in the morning. So I really didn't have much choice but to agree. Yeah, I said, okay. So I went home and I put on a little polo shirt and I thought I was rolling. I came into the shop and I had no idea what to do. So the crews were all good. I knew them all because I'd worked with them.
Well, yeah, and you know that aspect of the
Yeah,
business.
yeah,
Solid.
yeah. So I had to order some material. So I had my office. They had me a nice little place and all the stuff. No computer because we didn't have those yet.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure somebody will be like, well, they had computers. Yeah, but the majority of the world didn't utilize them.
Not for a plumbing company. It
Right.
was something that
Right.
it was archaic. So we're talking about pre-1990.
Yeah.
Certainly there wasn't internet. So I picked up the phone to order some materials, and I really didn't know how to say that other than swearing to the guy and say, hey, I need some friggin' 90s and T's. And so I was kind of taken back. I hadn't finished high school, and I was a plumber, was good at it, but I hung up the phone, and I thought, if I'm going to be in the office, I'm going to be representing this deal. I should probably do a better job. So I scripted it. This is my name, and I did the whole thing. I filled out the deal,
Mm-hmm.
and I picked up the phone and I ordered the material and sounded what I thought was like a person. I had a PO number and a job number,
Right.
and it was the materials were always square. So I thought, you know what? I think I'll take it upon myself. Maybe I should just go back to school. So I did. I went and I got my high school diploma. Actually, it was more than an equivalency. I went to college for night school for 3 or 4 months and took all the tests and all the stuff. So I got that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't tell anybody. I just thought I should have that. So I went in and I was talking to the owner. I said, hey, by the way, I said, I went back to school and at least got my diploma so I don't embarrass anybody.
Try to represent the company better, represent myself better. Yeah.
And he was extremely educated, and our relationship is as worse as any two could be in the world at this moment. But I looked up that guy, something fierce, man, and he said,
master's in construction or something.
Yeah, he had a master's degree in building construction and plumbing, and he was just a smart guy, man. He was so smart. Man, he was on it. He was on point. So he said, if you want to keep going to school, I'll pay for it. And I asked for clarification. He said, no, whatever it takes. So I did. I went to night school for 4 years, and he paid for it, books and all. Yeah. And it was something else, and it was for business. And I took some business Spanish, and I took all the cool stuff. So I came out of that with. We got towards the end of there, and we had better than 50 trucks, and on occasion we'd have as many as 300 employees. And it was like being the Jabba the Hutt of plumbing, because all of those 50 crews would have troubles and I would solve them. Well, there's only 6, 7 things. There's not that many problems. But it appeared as though like I was some kind of genius. In fact, somewhere along the way in the early 90s, somebody came in my office with a computer, and they set that computer down, and they had Excel.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at the squares, and I went out and I looked at the trucks, and I looked at each one of the guys one guy had on a cowboy hat, and one guy had on board shorts, and one guy was wearing a jeans jacket. So what I did was I put the like people together,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went to Excel and plugged them into the crews, and I did the jobs across the top, and all of a sudden they thought I was some kind of management guru. It's just Excel. I just plugged it in. If there was an empty spot, then I needed somebody to work, or I needed a job, or we need, so Excel, even today, even now in the programs that we use in the company.
Yeah. It's funny how it's not it's not Excel clearly, but the management
Yeah.
software is very Excel-ish.
Exactly.
Like you could actually probably even do, you couldn't do all the analytics on the background and
No.
reconciling all that stuff. But as far as the scheduling part of it goes, it is very Excel-esque.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's all it was then is that. So there's a million stories that go along with most of that stuff. So, and then I decided that was just a horrible life. There were so many people and so much going on that we came up here to Georgia and started doing trim work, started doing sub work because it was enjoyable.
So what year are we in now?
2000.
2000.
Yeah. And it was enjoyable. We worked for some of the bigger companies, worked for all the bigger companies, I guess. And we tossed back and forth and did some odds and ends even through the crash, which was kind of tough. And then in December of 2015, my son was outside sales for one of the larger supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
And you called him. He was unhappy. So,
I was not having it. It wasn't, it's funny growing up as a plumber's kid, you spend a lot of times at supply houses and you spend time around it. Second generation, I've been around it my whole life. Right. And you see one side of it and you're like, oh, that seems like the side to get into.
Yeah.
Like that's where I want to go.
Yeah.
And then you spend a couple of years, like I said, I did some warehouse stuff for one of the big distributors and some inside sales stuff, and then did some inside outside stuff for another one. And it's not my cup of tea.
No, it's horrible.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's just it's a good career path for a lot of people. Sure. I mean, I'm still good friends with a lot of those people. One of the founders of the school is kind of has the opposite story of me. Right. He grew up on that side, did our side a little bit, and then went back. I called you up. Hey man.
Yeah.
We got let's do something. We got to go do something else, man. We got to do our own thing after so many years of not. So yeah.
So we did. That was Christmas time of 2015, roughly. So on January 4th of 2016, we didn't even have trucks. I was actually working for someone else at the time and doing some odds and ends. So I didn't even have a plumbing truck. So my son and I grabbed 2 pair of channel locks and borrowed a truck, and we opened Mastercraft Plumbing. And it's been a great ride, man. I'll tell you, after all these years, this will be our 9th year.
9th year, yeah.
Yeah, and we feel very fortunate. But we tell everybody that with 2 pair of channel locks and a borrowed truck, we put it together. Now we have one of the most successful, of course, I'm going to say that no matter what, and one of the largest service companies in the area. And we can say that in 9 years, we've never actually let anybody down.
No, I don't think. I think that's an accurate.
You might have got a couple that are a little bit aggravated, just a little bit.
You're going to aggravate somebody no matter what.
Some of them we might have aggravated on purpose.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. Yeah,
you'll never know who you are,
but you won't be invited to see this podcast.
That's exactly it.
That's right. Yeah. So we can go back again. I'll go back to the beginning about some of the things that have changed.
Before you do that real quick, I just want one story.
Sure.
And there's this very specific one, and I don't think we're going to get in trouble for talking about it. Actually, there's 2.
Okay.
One, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about it. The other one, I love the story, and it's the Bill France story.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's 2 Bill France Jr. stories. Because of how much work you did. Richard Petty, you always joke
all
about
the stuff.
it.
That's right.
Richard Petty calls you Greg.
Well, Richard Petty calls my son Chris. So,
yeah. Because of how involved you were in the Daytona through the 90s, that whole crowd of people. And
I can give you the whole Daytona's timeline, I guess.
Yeah.
Before I went in the office, like I talked about before, I was working at the Speedway, and you had to start pretty early, and it was always a rush. They would usually start too late in the year and try to get ready for the Daytona 500 or whatever race that happened to be. So I found myself in a brand new 1985 and a half Ford F-250 utility body truck. To me, I don't know if a better vehicle in the world existed. I was a plumber, and I pulled onto the racetrack, and
this is when you were still in the field.
Yeah, still in the field. Yeah. I had big ladders on the roof. It looked like a fire truck. My son used to call it a fire truck. Right. And
it was red. I didn't know the difference.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. We were working in the front. There's what they call flying bathrooms, and it was freezing cold, man. I'll tell you. So the racetrack is quiet at 6:30 in the morning. There's nobody around, and I found myself in the middle of the Daytona Speedway with nobody around.
Well, this is when you actually had to drive over the track to get to infield.
There's 2 ways. Yeah, you can go over under, but the over was open.
Yeah.
And I turned that truck to the right, and I floored it. And I went around turn 1, and I went around turn 2, and it was so funny. And my helper was up in the air. He was holding on for dear life. I don't know if I got up to 100. I don't know if that old truck could go that fast, but I came around off of turn 2 and coasted into the back stretch. And a guy named Red, who did security there forever, he was proud of the fact that he never took a vacation. He met my vehicle headlight to headlight. And he got out like Jackie Gleason in Smokey and the Bandit. He sauntered up to that truck. He says, you got that shit out of your system now, boy? I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir, I do. I said, I apologize. He said, don't you ever let me see you do that again. I said, no, sir, Red, I'll never do that again. But he couldn't take it away from me.
But you did it.
I did it. So I have been on that speedway.
Might have had one of the only F-250
That's
like,
right.
work
Oh,
trucks.
sure.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I was worried about it slipping, but those tires grip pretty good. They must have been good tires. And there's a bunch of other stories. And I had quite a few conversations with Richard Petty and Rusty Wallace and all those guys. I wasn't necessarily a NASCAR fan, and I kind of always felt bad that I wasn't because I was so involved with this.
Right.
You know? So this particular time, again, late 80s, 88, early 99, 89 rather, Bill France Sr., who's pretty big. He's about 6'4", maybe 6'5". He came walking up. We were working in the speedway and they had little meetings all the time. And the France father and son were pretty heavily involved at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill France Sr. came walking up to me, hung out his hand. He says, how do you do? He says, I'm Bill France. And I said, how are you? And he shook my hand.
Kind of a neat experience, even for not somebody who's involved in NASCAR. Yeah.
And then he stopped and I saw all of the air go out of his eyes. And he says, are you the young man that's going to be taking me to Boston today? And I thought, whoops. And I said, no, sir. No, I don't think so. Meanwhile, Bill France Jr. caught wind of what was going on. He was over there.
Keep an eye on Dad.
He came around like a leaf in a wind, boy. He showed up. Now, Bill France Jr. I don't think he was 5'8". He was a pretty short kid. And when he got to Bill France Sr., Bill France Sr. stuck out his hand like he'd done to me, and he said, hi, young man, I'm Bill France. Bill France Jr. looked at him and said, for Christ's sake, Dad, get in a damn car. And he shoved his dad in the backseat of that car. It was hilarious. That was my whole experience of Bill France. He was a great guy. Yeah. He brought that motorsport, and he brought so much money to Daytona. He was a genuinely good person. And then fast forward 10 years or so, I had a pretty good relationship with Mr. France. And Junior
at this point. Yep.
The senior had passed away, I'm sure. And we were doing the backstretch, and they've since actually torn that down.
Yeah, just recently, I believe. Actually. Yeah.
Blew it up. Is kind of cool. And I got a phone call in my office about 6:30 in the morning. What had happened? We were setting the fixtures at this. The guys were setting the fixtures at this speed, the backstretch, and they had a bunch of suites, and it was pretty nice, pretty good digs up there, you know. And but we had a bunch of open pipes, and somewhere along that evening, the painter had showed up and opened a 2-inch copper main down on the floor, down on the ground, and didn't go upstairs and left it running, and then left the job. Well, the water shouldn't have been turned on. Yeah, somebody probably should have locked it off, but certainly nobody should leave it on. So Bill France Jr. gets to work 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's water streaming out of his entire, all down the bleachers and it was horrible. And he called me on the phone. I picked up the phone, and without introduction, he said, I'm going to have you killed and buried at a shallow grave out in the pines.
Wow. And not.
He wasn't kidding.
There was no joking in that.
He was pretty upset.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, wow, that's no place to be right there, you know? But he wasn't kidding at all. He had probably said that before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I started thinking, gee, maybe I shouldn't be involved in some of the stuff as I am, you know? So the story got out, and, you know, funny thing is he never did apologize.
No, I wouldn't.
I think he was saving that for later.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Put that in the bank.
Yes. Yeah. And that was one of my last dealings with Bill France Jr. And we did a little bit more work, but I don't think I ever spoke to him again after that.
I can see why not.
Because I didn't want to.
I made a choice, and I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Yep. That's funny. So going back to changes.
Yeah.
I want to be aware of time, not go too long.
Yeah.
What changes? So from the start, so we're talking mid-70s.
Yeah.
Right. So everything was lead oakum, galvanized, some copper.
That's right. Yeah.
To today, which is none of that stuff.
It's lick and stick now, for crying out loud. Yeah. So back in the early days, the plumbers would use all lead and oakum. There was no PVC, at least not in our area. I don't know what year that came around, but it wasn't around us.
Right.
So the first thing we would do every morning is we would take a turkey fryer. it wasn't, I don't remember it being as big as a 5-gallon bucket, but of a 3.5, 4-gallon bucket, we would put a flame under it, and you would turn that on, and that flame would go all day. It was in the background, nonstop, just the whole time.
Well, and if for any non-plumber listening, it was to liquefy the lead,
Melt the lead,
which is how you fastened the cast iron pipe together with some rope called oakum, and then you'd pack it, and the lead, you'd pack the lead.
I've got some stuff here.
We're going to touch on that in a second.
Okay, all right. So anyway, and it was hot. The lead was hot.
Well, it's also liquid lead.
That's right. Right. So and then it went to PVC, and of course most of it was copper. So you'd solder all the copper, and it was all hands on, and it was difficult. It was much more skilled because you didn't want to mess anything up.
Well, it was difficult to fix, right? Like if you messed up a lead joint, it sucked.
It was a mess. You had to melt it out, or same thing with copper. If you had a leak, you had to dig into the wall and tear a bunch of stuff apart. So the trade today is much, much easier hands-on than it was. They've got it figured out. They've got the materials figured out. So it's a much easier process. And
what was that transition like from? Let's say the cast iron to PVC. Like what was that? Living through that transition, what was that?
Well, so for instance, I was on the job site that day, and the lead pot's going in. One of the sales guys got out of his truck, and he had a piece of PVC with him, and there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 plumbers, or some of us on a job. I don't remember. We were doing, and the lead pot's going, and so we're looking at it. We looked at the piece of PVC, and he had a hacksaw with him, and he cut this with a hacksaw instead of with a chisel. So right now, as far as me being a second or third year helper, that was kind of attractive right away.
Not some giant chain cutters.
Yeah, it was, all the reasons. So one of the first things they did is they showed you how to put the glue and all that, and they reached over, and can you imagine? Always in the background was nonstop. And then one moment we were all working, and the sales guy wanted to show us how the PVC was, and it was just like this. And the job site was quiet. And you heard somebody cutting PVC or the electrician, but it was still.
Right.
And it was deafening because we didn't believe how loud it was until it wasn't.
Right.
And it was such a big change. It was so nice. And you didn't, the fumes, good heavens, and the heat and all, that lead is heavy.
I heard it's not real great to breathe in and be around all the time.
And it comes in 25, they call them pigs of lead, and they came in 25-pound things you carried 2 at a time, and you'd put them in and melt them one slug at a time. It's kind of hard to explain, but man, that was just way, way better than now. It's way better. Yeah, way better. Everything was hard. Everything was hard. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You had to, even if you poured a lead joint, a single one, or copper, or whatever it was all hard, And the conditions were different. The people were way different. The people, they were just mean. Like it wasn't the same.
Right.
It's just different,
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. You didn't, and because there were so many plumbers, you could get 25 plumbers to show up at a job interview. And they'll throw rocks at you if they want to, because they could replace you in the same day.
A little disposable, a little bit more disposable.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest single change? The biggest, I don't want to say most influential, but what do you, if you were to look back and say that was a turning point in the trades for plumbing, is there that moment, or is it just so like one piece after another?
I would say it would be fairly gradual. I think, I don't really know. That would be a tough one because it did change, like a tide. It was much more like the tide changing than it was anything else.
And there's a few big, like you said, there's the switching from cast iron.
Yeah.
There's cordless tools.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Cordless tools was a big deal.
Yeah. Because everywhere you went, you had to draw a cord.
Right.
And if there wasn't power, you couldn't work. Or I remember going on the roofs of houses and beating a hole for the vent with a hatchet.
Really?
Because you couldn't get power. So you'd like a Mohican up there, whack, try to cut through the plywood, try to do
Beat a hole in it.
That's right. Yeah. So that was that particularly, absolutely, the power tools have made a huge difference. But the rest of it has happened so gradual. And then somewhere along the mid to early 2000s, the licensing structure and the company structure left. And it was taken over by, especially in the residential side, by larger companies who did all sub work. And none of the subcontractors were licensed.
I don't think that's something that a lot of the people kind of recognize is the lack of licensure in our business.
Yeah.
And, you know, we touch about it here on the program. We touch about it on the school is you know, in the state of Georgia, there are a lot of people out there doing plumbing work that are not licensed.
Right. The majority of them.
Yeah, the majority are.
That's right.
Right. There's 89 plumbers per 100,000.
Yeah.
There's 1,330 nurses per 100,000.
Right.
So that just is a rough number. The majority of people out there plumbing
They're
are not plumbers.
That's right.
Not plumbers.
And if you go out and decide to do plumbing, it's hard to get caught. Now, if you do something and do damage to someone, for instance, if you've been in plumbing for a couple of years, typically the average go-getter guy, he's in plumbing for 2 years, he's going to get his own truck and take off and call himself a plumber. Well, that's the worst thing in the world for everybody involved, especially that person, because he's not learning the rest of the trade. He doesn't have insurance. He's not licensed. His customers don't know any of this information, and it's catastrophic when they make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we go after them pretty heavily. If we find out someone is in business or pretending to be in business without being licensed, it's horrible. But that being said, no new construction home in Atlanta for the last 25 years has been done by a licensed plumber, unless it was a custom home.
I would say as far as track housing goes, yeah,
Yes.
the company was licensed,
Yes.
but the actual guy in the field drilling holes and putting
Right.
in pipe was not.
Right. So there are millions of houses.
Or
where
if there was, it was certainly a rare one-off.
Yeah.
If there was.
Maybe the supervisor, maybe.
Maybe.
But so all these houses that were built, they never had a licensed plumber in them.
No.
Ever. They were inspected. You know, they were inspected by the local inspectors and passed inspections. So don't misunderstand me. They're not all put together incorrectly. The rules were followed, but there were no licensed plumbers doing that work.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's right.
So let us segue that into tools.
Antique guys.
Antique guys.
The old guys, what the old guys used to do, and this is kind of a neat thing we like to tell. I have assembled some old antique tools. I want to share them with everybody if I could.
Yeah, I'm gonna if it's loud from hit my mic. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm gonna bring the box up here. Let's do the whole box.
Okay. All right. So here is I'll start off with this.
So if you're not watching, if you're just listening, it's a wooden toolbox that's probably 7 by 7 by 16, maybe.
Yeah.
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 Definitely a handmade wooden toolbox.
Yeah. And what it contains is a series of lead and oakum tools. And if you can't see it, it's hard to explain. But some of them are longer, more slender. And when you would put cast iron together, it would go a male and female joint, and you would put a rope product called oakum, and then you would take what's called a yarning iron. I'm holding one up here, and you would push that oakum down into the joint. And beat it in there pretty good. So you would seal it. And
you had to pack that down in there.
Pack it down pretty tight.
Yeah.
So, and they had a lot of different yarning tools. They would have different ones. Most people had their favorite. And they had ones that would go around the pipe. That's hard to see, but go around the pipe one way or the other. You got that? And then after you did that yarning,
you can see that kind of,
yeah.
So it reaches around the back side. So if you had a piece of pipe and it was against a wall, you could reach in there against it.
Yeah. So then also they would, so then after you put that oakum in there, the pipe would be fairly rigid. It wouldn't fall over. So you can imagine if you just put a piece of metal pipe inside a hub, it doesn't stay. So you would put that oakum in there and smash it in there, and it would hold the pipe from moving. And then you would go walk over to our lead pot, and we would take the ladle, and you would dip the lead, and you would carry it over there, and you would simply pour it into the fitting. And the object was to, in one pour it to about a 1/4 inch below the top, because if you poured it in 2 pours, it would be a cold pour, and it wasn't the same thing. It had to be one continuous heated vessel. And if it was too big, then your buddy'd usually help you, and you'd do 2 pours at the same time. And then once the lead was put in there, then they had a caulking iron. They had not as many examples of the yarning. They had caulking irons. One of them would be an inside caulking iron, this one here, a smaller one. And then one of them would be a larger one here.
Yeah, because it's not one small, like if it's a 3 or 4 inch joint, the inside radius and the outside radiuses are going to be slightly different.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can imagine from the pipe to the edge of the fitting, there's probably a 1/2 inch there. So, and you could also sign these by how good a job you did. So you would set this This is an inside one because it's shorter. And you said, and you smash, and you'd move it and smash, and you would run all the way around the inside of the lead joint where it hit the pipe. And then you would come back later, that same pass, and you would take the larger one, try to figure that out.
Trying to get it.
And you would do the same thing. You just smash it and go around the outside. So now you had two distinctive patterns that were, you would smash the lead down onto the oakum. And it would probably take maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on situation.
For each joint.
For each joint. Yeah. So if you were working on a house, it would take you days to pour the fittings on that. So these guys.
A T or a Y could act, or like a combo. You threw if you made your own combo, that could literally take all before lunch.
Oh yeah.
For
absolutely.
one fitting. Yeah.
And then if it was laying down, it's even harder. They had a rope that they would put around it and tie off at the top, and that's impossible to show, but that would be much more difficult. They used what's called a running rope. So, but these tools, being as old as they are, you can see that these ends, can you try that? You can see those ends have been smashed. And the same thing with this, that they've been hit and rounded over. So some craftsman, some tradesperson.
Let me try to find one that's not.
Yeah, so here's kind of what they look like when they were new. So you can imagine how long it would take to do that to a tool.
It always reminds me of like a tent stake, like a circus tent stake. You know, they're all mushroomed over.
That's right. Over time.
Yep.
And the mushrooming wasn't from hitting it. The mushrooming was from hitting it repeatedly and heating it at the same time. So if you hit it 15 times, it would get so hot you couldn't touch it. And only then would the process of it rolling would happen. And the interesting part about these is that you talk about that lead pot that day, is that these tools are mine. I bought these tools, all of them new. And the day that we shut that lead pot off, I put these all in this box. And I closed the lid and I put them under my bed. And I was awful glad to hear this, because it was a lot better than that lead pot going.
Not the same as just whipping out a glue can real quick and
not at all. Yeah, that glue was kind of fun after that long day.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, I don't think I would change anything in my plumbing career. I was glad to have done most of it. There were some yucky times, I guess, on occasion, but the stories go on forever. We lost a backhoe one time. We were working on a water tower in Florida, and we had taken the backhoe at Tillman's Plumbing, and we put the backhoe against the cap on a Friday afternoon, and the water tower was full, and we went home. And next Monday, we all showed up and had our coffee, and we're looking, and somebody had stolen the backhoe. We had the trailer, but the backhoe was gone. And I looked down in the sand, and I took my boot, and I saw the very top knuckle of the backhoe sticking up out of the sand. But what had happened, that cap had come loose, and it just turned that soil over. Of course, it's sugar
sand, yeah.
And it had turned it over. You can imagine, like you see running a hose and some toys in the sandbox, and it buried that backhoe completely, except for a really small 3/8 chrome knuckle sticking up out of the top of that box. But the stories go on forever. But
the plumbing has literally taken care of me my entire life.
That's right.
That's exactly second generation.
That's right.
I've done it my whole life. I grew up all around it.
That's right.
And that's literally, that's always been there.
That's right. Well, he would get out of school 8th or 9th grade and come and help me in the evening sometime.
Oh yeah.
Summers
cold and
that's right. Yeah. So it's been a good run. I wouldn't change it. I really wouldn't. And now people think that I'm some kind of genius because I know the stuff I know. And the truth is, folks, I ain't no kind of genius, man. I've been doing it for 45 years. If I don't know it, then there's a problem.
There might be a problem.
Yeah.
There might be a problem. I would say you're probably a plumbing guru, but that's just me.
I do have people contact me from all over this country, the people that I worked with, and vice versa. And it's kind of flattering when they call and say, hey, I got this problem or that problem.
I always love when you hear it and a guy will be talking and they'll be calling Greg, I need help with blah, 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 blah. Well, you reach around there and there's going to be a little yellow thing and you need to give a quarter turn and press the red button or whatever
That's
it is.
Right.
You're like, no. Oh, I fixed it. Yeah, I know.
Recently, I had a couple guys working on a 2-inch CPVC ball valve behind a water heater at a hotel, and they couldn't turn it. They came back to the shop and said, Greg, we can't turn that. So I drove all the way to the hotel, which is unusual. I don't get out in the world very much anymore. And I said, take 2 screwdrivers and take the handles to the screwdrivers. Spencer, I hope you're listening. And take those screwdrivers and just beat on that pipe as fast as you can while you're opening that valve. So they did. They beat on that pipe and they opened.
Now this guy
valve.
Spencer he's talking about. Spencer has a degree in
physics.
Physics.
Yeah.
Very,
he really
very
does.
smart individual. Yeah.
And he was like, man, That's amazing. How did that work? I said, it didn't make any difference. You just weren't trying hard enough to open the valve.
Just got to give them something to believe in.
Just got to give some people something to believe in. That's right.
That's it.
But anyway.
Well, in interest of time,
yes.
Like you said, the stories go on and on and on. We've forgotten half the good ones.
Right. If you're interested, I'll jot a bunch of them down. Maybe we'll do another one and tell some of the great stories.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Do a second version.
Yes.
Of story time.
Absolutely.
Get you a little leather chair.
All the guys.
Little pipe. Story time with Greg.
No, I'm going to be at the beach. Sorry.
Bedtime stories for Greg.
That's right.
Anytime we have a guest on, we are presenting them with a TEC shirt.
Nice.
So this says Trades Education Center on the front.
Yep.
And on the back, it has
nice
TEC Foreman.
Nice.
So this is for you.
Roland would be proud.
Yes.
Good
now
job.
You've
I got a shirt.
come full circle, and you.
Well, thank you very much.
Foreman now, so
thank you very much.
I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing the story. It's special to me, of course.
Yeah.
To get it written down and get it recorded and like that. So, I think it's awesome, and I can't tell you that I appreciate the industry because
me too.
Yeah, it's been great to me. So,
and in closing, I am officially retired.
That's difficult.
I hate it. I hate it. I'm ready to go back to work.
Yeah. No.
I'm going back to Florida to get me a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Not. Yeah. Job fishing.
I was at Home Depot this afternoon fishing around for people that needed help. Hey, needed plumbing help?
He did. He called me this afternoon and he's like, "Hey, I don't know what to do, man.
This is horrible."
Yeah. He came in the shop for a few minutes and
walked around aimlessly and
t-shirt and a pair of board shorts and flip flops.
That's right. But anyway, I appreciate
long hair.
I appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a good run. It really has. And here we are.
There's worse things.
Oh yeah,
there are worse things. So.
Working in a warehouse.
Well, if you work in a warehouse and you're looking for something better,
yes,
come visit us. Come talk to us. You can better yourself 100% in our industry. So,
absolutely.
With that, Greg, once again, thank you, Dad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Like, subscribe, whatever all
thumbs
the things
up.
are,
all the
thumbs
stuff,
up,
man.
all the stuff.
Leave a comment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not too good at this part of it, but let us know if there's something specifically you want us to go over, either myself or Keith.
Yeah,
we always have time to make a couple videos and
absolutely.
like that. So once again, thank you guys all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.